The way we lead impacts the way people live. This world needs truly human leadership.
The thing that Bob said that to this day absolutely resonates with me in everything I do and everywhere I go. And when I start to, become too focused on results, I remind myself, or when I have to have hard conversations with someone about performance or whatever the case might be, he said, as leaders, we need to treat those in our care with the knowledge that they are someone's precious child. And that hit home with me because of all the decisions I've made in my entire life, one of the best ones was having my daughter.
I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and threads at Barry-Wehmiller, and find our podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. Laurie Butz is the president and CEO of Capital Credit Union, a credit union with more than 120,000 members in Northeast Wisconsin. And we at Barry-Wehmiller definitely consider Laurie to be part of our extended family. Laurie's husband, Dennis, worked for many years for our paper converting machine company, or PCMC, which is based in Green Bay, Wisconsin, part of our BW Converting group of companies. Our CEO, Bob Chapman, has been privileged to be part of Laurie's leadership journey, and Laurie has enlisted Bob and Cynthia Chapman's nonprofit, Chapman Foundation for Caring Communities, to bring our leadership training into her organization. Laurie is also working with the Chapman Foundation on a very special initiative in Green Bay, where Capital Credit Union is also based. As we say at the beginning of this podcast, the way we lead impacts the way people live. That's one of the driving forces behind the importance of practicing what we call truly human leadership. And on this podcast, we're going to tie all those threads above together in talking about how truly human leadership impacted Laurie's life at home and consequently her own leadership journey. And we're going to start off with Laurie introducing herself.
I am Laurie Butz, and I was born and raised in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I am married to Dennis Butz, who gave me this wonderful last name. And of course, I'm kidding about the wonderful nature of the last name, but it works. And we have been together for 34 years, married for 34 years, I should say. And we have a beautiful daughter who I am a proud military mom. She graduated from NC State in Raleigh, North Carolina under a full military scholarship and is now an Army officer. But she also lives just 30 minutes south of us. So proud of her and all that she has accomplished. I have been with Capital Credit Union for 2.5 years, and I am fortunate that I had an opportunity not long as I was going through college to get in the financial industry and have stayed that course my entire career. So I was in banking, insurance, investments, and all of that, which led me to credit unions, which I started my journey on the credit union scope, which is very different than banks. And I think people really underestimate the difference that there is between those. So I fell in love with the credit union industry already. It's 15 years ago.
Tell me a little bit about the difference between banks and credit unions. How would you explain that to people?
So there are probably three big elements of it that resonate for me as a real difference. One is banks are for profit. So everything they do, they are doing it for a profit, and it is profiting their shareholders or stakeholders. A credit union is not for profit, and we are member owned. So everyone and it varies by credit union, but for Capital Credit Union, we have 120,000 member owners. Then we are able, because we don't have that drive to make a profit, we're able to really give back all of what we earn back to the member in the form of higher deposit rates, lower loan rates, and other services beyond that.
Well, you have a special connection to Barry-Wehmiller.
I do.
Let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about that special connection.
Yeah, so it starts with my husband, of course. You know, my husband worked for PCMC, which is a Barry-Wehmiller owned company, back for 27 years. He actually just retired from there a year and a half ago. But he worked for the owner who was previous to Barry-Wehmiller and previous to Bob Chapman coming into the organization. And the company was really, really in bad state. And just to give you a sense of that was almost 29 years ago. So my husband and I were, relatively newly married. We had bought a home, and there was talk of the company shutting down. There was talk of the company laying people off. My husband was actually laid off a number of times, but then called back. And then we heard about they were being bought, and they were being bought by Barry-Wehmiller.
I've heard a lot of different things from a lot of people that worked for PCMC during that time. Talked to a lot of those people. What was that like for you and your family?
Well, it was nerve-wracking, I will absolutely tell you. If I think back to those days, when you have a brand new home and you're newly married and you have two vehicles and I think I had been fully employed at the time I was done with my educational pursuits, and thankfully we didn't have that debt. But then to lose my husband's income for even periods of time through these layoffs, and he's a smart guy, and fortunately, he has a lot of great skills that are transferable, and he was able to gain employment at other machine shops and other organizations in the community to have some income coming in. But this whole idea that this company, and just to give you a sense, my husband's father also had previously worked at PCMC, and I'm thinking for 20 some years. So thinking that he's going into this stable type of an organization and then finding that it's not stable and they're losing money and so forth. And if I remember that, that being in the early 2000s, my daughter would have been about, 6 or 7 at the, maybe a little bit older, but those, we needed his income. We needed that stability. So just that sense of concern about financials. And I think that's also why my ability to do what I do every single day through the credit union space to help families who are faced with this every single day. There are families out there who are struggling to no fault of their own, and they're hardworking, good people who are subjected to bad management in organizations that cause turmoil in an organization. It just, you name it, what could go wrong in any organization. And then with the economy the way it is, and like I said, medical crisis, and we didn't have any of those additional problems, but certainly it was nerve-wracking. And I remember Dennis was really hard hit because he would have to eliminate people's jobs, and that's hard. That's now, you get to stay employed, but they lose their jobs. That it just was not a good time. So when Barry-Wehmiller came in, it was such an incredible relief to see the immediate, and I will say, and Dennis will say this too, it was 2 years, and that company was turned around, and it was like that dire strait had never happened. And we knew nothing about Barry-Wehmiller and Bob Chapman. We didn't know anything about this. But as my husband would describe it, and we talk about it, pretty often because it was life-changing for both of us. When Barry-Wehmiller took over PCMC, they immediately came in and implemented L3, which was a lean manufacturing methodology. And my husband was selected, which was kind of bizarre because he's kind of a quiet guy, but he's a hard worker, had good relationships, and was leading a small team. But they put him in the value stream, and actually he became a lean facilitator across Barry-Wehmiller, and he did lean manufacturing, and they stood up the new equipment and parts manufacturing under this value stream process. And I laugh because, so then he would come home and 5S our house or 6S our house. It's like this whole lean Six Sigma or Kaizen events and whatever. And I'm like, what are you doing? Who are you? And it was great because the concept was to bring into this whole process improvement. And he was well underway in learning and starting to do this. And we recently had an opportunity to talk about some of the leadership fundamentals that Barry-Wehmiller brought into play. And he recalls a very distinct point in time when Bob Chapman had come into a session, and they were talking about the lean process and lean manufacturing and process improvement and value streaming. And I can't remember exactly the words that my husband used that Bob's behavior happened, but I'm going to say Bob came unglued. And he came unglued because it was all about process. It was all about, here are all the steps in the process, and here are all and Bob lost it. And he was just like, no, this isn't about process. This is about people. We need to make this about people. Organizations don't succeed because of process. They succeed because of people. And my husband, and of course, you would think, well, of course they do, right? But it was so intensely different than what the teachings were. The lean process, Kaizen, it's all about value stream mapping and, could be or will be, all that kind of stuff. And Bob was like, no, this is going to be about people. So it really caused the L3 team at the time to really shift and started focusing on leadership fundamentals and the people side. Mm-hmm. And my husband said that was the big shift. That took them from a struggling organization that was operationally inefficient and ineffective and losing money to an organization that someone breathed life into. And the leadership essentials and the lean value streaming integration changed people's lives. And I can attest to it changed my husband. I mean, he was a different guy. So now fast forward, because that gets to be, that was, I think it was like in 2006 or 2007 when that evolution happened and when they were purchased. And within 2 years, they were just fast tracking to amazing record growth and record performance, and employee satisfaction was certainly a key part of that. And I was inspired by, and I was watching all of this happening kind of from the sidelines, and I started to notice that all of a sudden my husband was getting these different kinds of recognition things. People were recognizing him for certain things. And like I said, he's kind of a quiet guy. So all of a sudden he's this quiet leader that is kind of making his way in this new organization. And then he won a car. And I don't mean he got to keep the car, but he won. I can't remember.
Was it one of the SSRs?
Yes. He won this SSR, and it was a bright yellow SSR, really kind of funny, but obviously he doesn't get to keep it, but he got to take it for a weekend. And funny story about it, it really only fits 2 people, but we figured out a way to fit my daughter, my husband, and I in that front seat of that vehicle, and we drove it 4 hours to my sister's house and back, and to show off this car and really get the most of it for the weekend. And it was an amazing opportunity, but that was one of the first times I really got to interact with Bob Chapman, and was instantly impressed by his caring nature and his genuine concern for people, and his willingness to give his cars, because this was his car, to employees to recognize their efforts. And I remember him sharing the story is that he was so proud that very often the first thing a person did when they got the car was they'd go show their mom.
Mm-hmm.
And these are adult men in most cases but they would go show their mom, and just what a cool experience. And we have some amazing pictures from that day and that experience and that weekend. But that was the first time I really got to interact with Bob.
Yeah. You were talking earlier about Dennis being part of the L3 team. Why do you think that made such a difference for him? Why was that so important to him?
Well, I think the biggest thing is he was part of the solution. He became part of even the ability to be involved in decision making, be involved in brainstorming how to do things better. Because one of the things that I just know about the process, as well as he had shared throughout the years, was one of the most frustrating things is to do a job that is a stupid way of doing it. But your boss or your management won't let you change it. That's torture.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all of a sudden, now you go to the people who are actually doing the work and start asking them and involving them in how can we do it better. Oh my goodness, they light up like Christmas trees. You get them talking and they can't stop. They want to tell you everything that is blown up and wrong with how they're doing their job, because and then there are some of them that don't even know why they do it this way. It's like, well, I don't know, that's because the guy 10 years ago taught me to do it that way, and so now that's how I do it. And it's like taking a person and making them a robot to just, well, this is what you have to do, and they're just becoming machines. So all of a sudden, what Dennis was able to do is go, no, you're not a machine. I want you to tell me, why are you doing this? And if you don't know why, let's figure out, should we still be doing that? And to have that ability. Now, it did cause some change, and people are naturally afraid of change. And I'm not going to pretend that everyone was on board right away with L3. There was a lot of distrust in the organization. Anytime you get new leadership, I can speak for myself, as a new leader in an organization, that people question what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. Is that change going to be a good thing or a bad thing? Is process improvement going to eliminate their job? And all of those fears come about too. So, and, people don't like to go from familiar to unfamiliar. They like to understand what's coming and what's going to happen to them. So I think that was why L3 really was so good is because Bob was so intense about include the people, involve everyone, get their input, get the people on the front line who are doing it to tell you how it should be done, not somebody who's sitting in a glass office somewhere who doesn't have a clue.
So at the same time, all these things are happening with Dennis at work. All these new ideas are flowing through, and he's on his own leadership journey. You're on your own leadership journey at this same time. And somewhere these things kind of interconnected. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the really interesting things about my life and my relationship with Dennis has always been, he has always said, you know what, your career, you are uber career oriented, I will always support that. So, and he has been true to that every single step of the way through my undergrad, my master's, my working crazy long hours, traveling all over the world through my employment opportunities. And he was primary caretaker of my daughter, our daughter, I should say, but he was primary caretaker so that I could pursue my career. And I was doing just that. I was saying yes to everything, really, like I said, I worked in the financial industry, and as you know, it's a very male dominated industry. And I wanted to continue to kind of break the glass ceiling and pursue everything I possibly could. And I was doing all of that, and you know how, and I don't, and it's kind of like when the water is boiling, if you're in the pot, you don't realize all of a sudden, and then it starts boiling, and then you're cooked. I felt a little bit like that. I had been pursuing this career so intensely that all of a sudden I started to get in this very unfulfilled sense about what I was doing, but I kept pushing that back because I'm just not there yet. As I want to be a CEO, and I set my sights on that pretty late in my career. I never thought that was achievable until probably around 2010, when I moved to the credit union industry and worked for a female CEO. And it was then that I really thought, oh my God, this could happen. And so I started to be on that path to building up my knowledge of what it would take to be a CEO and everything that goes with that. And about 7 years into, well, actually, I'll back up. About 7 years ago, I was at a point where I could tell that I was frustrated. I could tell that I wasn't being the leader I wanted to be. I was all about results. I was just like, can't happen fast enough, can't, all of these things. And I had all this, some pretty significant responsibilities. And I remember being told by my leader at the time that I think part of what she had said was that she didn't think I was a good leader. It was some specific thing that had happened. And then kind of unpacked that, I was all about myself. And I remember being blinded by my anger.
Mm.
I look back and I can kind of chuckle at myself and how human behavior is, right? When I was furious, I was so furious. I actually don't recall the rest of the meeting. I don't recall what I did after the meeting. The next part of my recollection is I was in the car driving, and I was driving home, and I had a 50-minute commute And I was on the phone with Dennis, losing my mind. And I was just like, how can anyone say that I'm all about myself? I give everything to the organizations that I work for and the communities that I serve. And this is crazy, whatever. And I said, this is, BS. I'm going back to law school. I don't need any of this. I was going to pursue law school when I was younger. Maybe I'm just on the wrong track. What the heck was I thinking? And as I'm like losing my mind on the phone with Dennis, who has the patience of a saint, and I have none, he just quietly listened to me, and he's like, Laurie, because he knew then that I had decided I'm giving up my dream of CEO. I'm done. And he said, you know what? I'm wondering if I could call Bob Chapman and have you meet with him, because I don't think you should give up your dream. And I'm just like, oh, I don't know. Sure, go ahead, call him, and I think it was like, he called him the night. He might have even reached out that night in an email or something. And within I think it was less than 2 or 3 days, I had a meeting set up with Bob Chapman back then it was Skype. It was a Skype call. That was before Teams and Zoom and all that good stuff. And he started just asking me questions. And really, really, the thing that Bob said that to this day absolutely resonates with me in everything I do and everywhere I go. And when I start to, become too focused on results, I remind myself, or when I have to have hard conversations with someone about performance or whatever the case might be, he said, as leaders, we need to treat those in our care with the knowledge that they are someone's precious child. And that hit home with me, because of all the decisions I've made in my entire life, one of the best ones was having my daughter, deciding to have children, and was fortunate enough to give birth to her. And I thought to myself, would I want my daughter to have me as a leader as I was showing up then? And when I realized the answer to that was, I don't think so, I realized I wasn't showing up the way I wanted to show up. So maybe it was looking like I was all about myself, because what was I doing in my leadership style and my leadership approach? What was I doing that was getting in my own way? And I really had to own it. I couldn't blame the person who was the messenger. Now we could, I can blame her for a lot of things, but maybe not that. but you know what? I mean, it was a gift, and to have a conversation with him, and he just started asking me, how much and how often do I put the people? Do I think about the people side of what I'm doing and the people side of the results? And it actually, fast forward many coaching sessions later, because now I will say this with such gratefulness, is he has coached me for the last 7 years. Out of just the goodness of his heart, he's just because my husband called him and asked him to, and then we've continued on this journey together. So that's, he has been amazing. And when they stood up the foundation and started doing the community cares and community listens and all of that, I just it was profoundly impactful on my life and for the lives of the people that I get the privilege to lead every day. And I just want to be able to do more and bring, and he always says his mission is to make this a more caring world. And I absolutely am on that mission with him.
Mm. And so you eventually did become a CEO.
I did.
You did get to live that dream. How many people do you have in your span of care as CEO?
475 employees and team members, I should say, and we have 120,000 member owners.
Wow. Wow. So what are some things? So did you were just talking about Our Community Listens and the Chapman Foundation. Have you taken the listening classes?
Yes, actually, we have. Oh man, the numbers are getting pretty significant. We've had many of our employees have gone through. Probably it has to be over 50%. I'm thinking at this point. But we took our entire senior leadership team through Community Listens just back in February. A number of us had been exposed and gone through it previous, but I wanted the team to go through together. So we actually brought in Misty Jenks from the foundation, and they facilitated for our management team. And we even have had a board member go through the Community Listens session. And then we offer a number of sessions throughout the year, and we're offering it to our community as well with other partners. Because, I think that's what happens. We forget to listen. We forget to really hear people, but we live in a country that's fast, right? Everything's fast. We're moving fast. We digest things quickly. We spit things out quickly. And I think if we've learned anything through COVID, it's to just slow down, hear people, see them, really listen to them, really find out, who they are and how can we be better every day as a result of those efforts to not just get the work done, but also do it in a way that people rise together, if you will.
What are some of the takeaways and the impact that you and your team have felt because of the listening classes?
Well, as we look at our team members and we get the feedback, and I know even as the leadership team that we have talked about our takeaways, it really starts and it's personal. It's a lot of the, we're complicated human beings. Everybody is pretty complicated. You have all kinds of history. You might have scars. You might have joys, trauma, or pleasantries. But and then you come into life in this package. So I think one of the things we loved about the listening course was the DISC profile, the DISC, and identifying what your own individual style is and how that style makes you, it's kind of the lens for which you look at the world and also how people look at you. And so really understanding that it becomes personal, but then that ability to go, okay, if I'm a DI, dominant influencer, how does that show up? How do I show up to somebody who's a steady and a compliance, the S or C? And what does that all mean? And how can we better communicate with each other by understanding the drivers behind those styles, not using them as a crutch to go, oh, I'm a D, so I'm just going to always be that way. But how do we actually become flexible in our styles and really trying to flex to those others. So we've had a lot of feedback from the attendees that really speak to that style preference and so forth, and really how they can adapt their styles so that it doesn't get in the way of the communication with either individuals or groups. But then also to have diversity of thought. You know, we talk about, you know, diversity, inclusion in racial terms sometimes, but it's also in style terms. You know, how do we bring different types of thinkers to the table? How do we bring different styles to the table? And I think that's what I've seen happen as a result of the training, and also a greater level of appreciation for each other. And that's really what it boils down to for me, is that bringing that care, because you could still get a lot of work done. I'm an R squared. I created this R squared methodology, and we actually implemented it in part of our values for Capital Credit Union, is its results and relationships. Because you can't just have relationships. If you're you know, just having fun or whatever, or you can be I'll put it in a teller's terms. If you can be the nicest teller on the line, and a member comes in, you know their name, you do all their stuff, and then they give you whatever they're giving you, and you put it in somebody else's account, the results are not going to be there, you know. So
Yeah.
So you have to have accuracy, you have to have compliance, you have to have those elements of results, but that relationship is critically important, and you can't have the one without the other. They need to have a really, really nice balance. So that's one of the things that we really, really focus on. And it was an interesting evolution for me to be a very, very results-oriented individual throughout my whole career up until this real, you know, life-changing experience that brought me across the path of Bob Chapman. And it, you know, and sometimes it's all about timing, right? It was perfect timing. It was, you know, I was unfulfilled, unhappy, and for all intents and purposes, I should have been very fulfilled and very happy. And I think I'm not alone. I think that when I realized there can be so much more to life if you blend the results and relationships, and now blend it with caring and kindness and love. You know, I grew up in the HR world in my profession, so love wasn't a word you used in the workforce. So you tried to stay away from that. But the reality was, there is so much, you know, Steve Jones talks about love, and I know Bob Chapman and the Chapman Foundation have utilized Steve Jones in their leadership curriculum and training, if you will. And Steve Jones is a coach, one of the winningest coaches for high school football in the state of Wisconsin, and probably nationally. And he's just an amazing person, and he leads with love. So now I had the opportunity to get mentoring from Steve and have become good friends with Steve. So that love combined with the caring nature of Bob Chapman has brought such amazing kind of crossroads for me, that when I took on this CEO role, one of the key things that I wanted to make sure that I always led with, and I show up as a very caring leader. And I do a Monday morning message every week. And I'm not sure how this even started. It wasn't an intentional thing. It just came naturally. I did the Monday morning videos, and I usually do them from home with my dog Bella in the video. And it's an update. I give different shout outs to people who have been doing great things, or we're launching a product or project or doing something. And it's just my way of, rather than sending out an email. And at the end, I always end it with be kind and love one another. And that just stuck. And I think we're seeing that through the listening sessions. We implemented a new program last year on serving with heart, and heart is an acronym. And the first H is hear them, see them, listen to them and seek to understand. And I think that's what the listening sessions do.
Yeah. So you've done a lot of work with the Chapman Foundation, and one of their current initiatives, is to create caring communities, where they want to go in and designate caring communities with the work they're doing there. And they have their sights on Green Bay, which is an important city for Barry-Wehmiller, obviously. And I know it's kind of in its infancy, but how important do you see this being, and how important do you see this as happening?
I think that is huge. We were fortunate enough to be recognized as one of 8 of the caring companies through the foundation, and Bob and I have talked about the Green Bay market. And the interesting thing about Green Bay is that there's this football team. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Green Bay seems to have a lot of pride in it. They never talk about it.
Exactly. We never ever talk about that football team that we have. But no, in all seriousness, Green Bay is kind of known for that, legendary football team. We were recognized as one of the top cities in the country to live because of a combination of things. Obviously we have great education systems, great this, great that, great water, lots and lots of great things to do. But, the reality is, how can we be even better than that? How can we be known as one of the most caring communities with a football team? Instead of, we have there's a city, you have a football team, and happens to be caring and a good place to live too. No one can argue with, let's just make the world a more caring place.
Yeah.
Who would argue with that? That's a gift that just keeps giving. And I know Bob hopes that will keep going on long past our time on this planet. But it's just really, truly a gift.
Again, the way we lead impacts the way people live. At home, at work, in our communities, everywhere. And Laurie's story is just a great example of that. Don't forget to find us and connect on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads at Barry-Wehmiller. And you can find more podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening.